Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Bulls Head Bookshop on this beautiful spring day. Our guest today is Professor of History and American Studies here at UNC, and he's with us today to share from his new book, The Little Girl Who Fought the Great Depression, Shirley Temple in 1930s America, which is 25% off here at Bulls Head. Please help me welcome Professor John Kasson.
Thanks so much for coming. Today is the birthday of two great figures in Western culture, William Shakespeare and Shirley Temple. I'm going to talk about one of them. And this is also, I remind people that Mother's Day is coming. And what I want to do is to talk about, briefly, to talk about, in a sense, why I wrote this book, and give you a sense of what the book is about. And it's about, if we could just advance a little bit in the slides. Joy's going to help me here with the slides. Everyone is familiar with the basic history of the Great Depression, that it was the greatest peacetime crisis in American history, and it was, of course, a worldwide depression. What everyone's perhaps not familiar with is that the term depression was chosen deliberately by Herbert Hoover in preference to the term panic, which was the normal term used in the 19th century to denote a great economic downturn. Panic for him seemed to create jitters, and he thought depression was more euphemistic, that it suggested a lowering of prices and wages and a lowering of the economy. But of course it had a deeply appropriate emotional resonance as well. And the term clinical depression, in fact, just begins in the 1930s. And the Great Depression was an emotional crisis as well as an economic crisis. Hoover tried to address that, was notoriously unsuccessful, and Roosevelt was brilliant at that. When Roosevelt gave his great first inaugural address, the most famous line of that is, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." And so go to the next slide. And that line, of course, became a tremendous emotional summons to people as well as a summons to political action. And I argued that one of the greatest things that Roosevelt did in the early days of the New Deal was not only to help push through legislation for the 3 R's, relief, reform, and recovery, but also to create a new emotional mood, to make the smile the icon of his administration, and his laugh part of it too, and his warm voice. On the next slide. So Roosevelt was inaugurated in March 1933. Just a little over a year later, 13 months later, in April 1934, Shirley Temple's breakthrough film, Stand Up and Cheer, was released. It was a film in which she had a minor part. She had 7th billing in that film, but it was the film that captured the public fancy. She had been in films since the age of 3, but it was this film, made when she was about 5 and a half, released when she was 6, near her 6th birthday, 80 years ago, that she really captured the public fancy. And in that film, the Rooseveltian figure appoints a new cabinet member to his cabinet, who is to be the Secretary of Amusement. And the idea there, which was a self-serving Hollywood idea, was that in the time of the Depression, that the people are paralyzed on the rock of fear, and we need to break that rock with a gale of laughter. And so he appoints a new character, a Secretary of Amusement, to get people feeling good again. The next slide. In the course of that film, Shirley Temple is introduced. She is the daughter of a vaudevillian, Jimmy Dugan, played by James Dunn, and as he says, making his pitch to the Secretary of Amusement, why he needs this child even though she's under 7, and doesn't fit in with the codes of the administration of the several states, why he needs her in the act. They have this conversation. I want to play a clip from you for this conversation where he explains why he needs his daughter.
Mama, my daddy wants to see you.
Yeah, it's about me and Shirley.
Can you hear that when you turn it
All
up?
right.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm sorry, but you'll have to go through the usual channels, Mr. Dugan.
Oh, I don't need work. I'm booked solid for 40 weeks. You heard about my act. 10 minutes of songs and dancing that knocks them cold. It's about Shirley.
Yes, well, that's in Miss Adams' department.
No, it's about that new rule you made that a kid under 7 can't work in an act.
Oh, yes, well, we had to make that ruling comply with the laws of the various states.
Shirley doesn't really work in the act. She just sort of comes on at the finish, and she loves it. You see, it's this way, Mr. Cromwell. Me and the missus had an act together. Shirley was born, and we brought her up in the top of a trunk. Everything was going swell. And then Mrs. Dugan passed away. Since then, Shirley and me have been going it alone.
Well, don't you think she needs a woman's care?
I couldn't leave her with anybody else. Besides, I gotta have her in the act with me. She helps me over the rough spots, helps me build to a finish like the missus did. And look at her, Mr. Cromwell, she thrives on it. I gotta have her with me. How's chances?
How's Chance?
I think chances are great. Come here.
No.
And that move, that where Shirley locks eyes with an adult man and makes an emotional connection with him so that he can't let go, happens again and again in her films. How's chances was a catchphrase of the day. I think chances are great. Come here. She's irresistible. And in the act that they perform in this, I'll show you now. This was an act, this was where the public first saw, in an extended way, Shirley Temple do a tap dance. And here she is. It's a dance. This is just a fragment of a larger sequence, which begins with adult choreens, and Jimmy Dugan is kind of boulevardier. The party of the 20s is still going on, although it's 1934, and then little Shirley comes on.
Oops. Sorry.
Where'd you find that lovely cameo?
I'm presenting. All right now, baby, take a bow. Hear them whispering,
Isn't she the sweetest thing?
you're a standout.
She's cute, she's sweet, she's swell, she's grand. Who's the future Mrs. Hemingway?
Just a minute, ladies. I'm presenting. All right now, baby, take a bow.
Everybody's asking me, who's that bunch of personality? I'm presenting you right now. Daddy, take a bow. Everybody wants to know, who's that great big handsome Romeo? I'm presenting you right now. Daddy, take a bow. Hear them whispering, hasn't he got everything? He's a standout. Listen to the complimentary handout. Let's stand right up and say, who's the one brings mother all to pay? I'm presenting you right now. Daddy, take a bow.
And that film ends with fear has been broken after various complications to the plot, and it's a very silly movie. That that the economy has recovered, and it ends in a triumphal procession with parades of all kinds of uniformed workers of all imaginable occupations, to the song "We're Out of the Red." The Depression is over, and Shirley is in the headlines. Is in the front lines of that procession, and twice we get her in close-up. Shirley Temple and the other children have evidently done the trick, made people feel better, and of course that was Hollywood's pleading. Hollywood, as well as the larger economy, was in trouble in the early 30s. They were also scrambling for moral cover. Motion Picture Production Code was acquiring new teeth in 1934, and Shirley was providing, if you will, a moral fig leaf for Fox Films and the movie industry in general. On the next slide. In that, critics melted over Shirley. Said such a happy little face and such friendly brown eyes. One could always wants to scoop her off the screen and hug her. Her parents, by the next slide, renegotiated her contract with Fox Films, so it became more lucrative. And in the pictures, we see little Shirley supposedly signing the contract herself. We'll come back to the question of who was getting the money and what happened to it a little later on. And she, by the next slide, she had an enormous earning power in the 30s. Her salary eventually was one of the highest in Hollywood, and in addition, she had licensing opportunities that Clark Gable didn't have, such as Shirley Temple, hats, shoes, berets, underwear, coloring books, as well as cereals, and for that matter, large cabinet-sized radio sets and Packard automobiles, all kinds of things in that time. On the next slide. Meanwhile, Fox Films scrambled for films to put her into. They lent her to Paramount for 2 films, and the film that really made her a star in the 1930s was her second feature length, right after after Stand Up and Cheer, and that was Little Miss Marker, where she was with Adolphe Menjou. The film was based on a Damon Runyon short story in which Adolphe Menjou plays an off-track bookie named Regret, great Runyon-esque name, a person with no sentiment whatsoever. We might say, is the economic man, Roosevelt's economic man of the Great Depression, who needs to feel better in order to spend more. He's a sourpuss in his disposition. We get the sense that he once had a love affair with Bangles Carson, the kind of chanteuse, as they say at the nightclub, but that's gone south, and he calls her. He says hello, gold digger, to her, and she says hello, tightwad. And here we come into a scene where Shirley Temple's character's father wants to make a bet, but Regret won't take any IOUs, any markers, and so he's going to put offer his little girl as security, as we'll see. And Sorrowful Jones Sorrowful Jones regrets his assistant. Sorrowful Jones first says no, and then he changes his mind. And watch this.
I want to bet $20 on green prints. The win.
Sorry, it's not louder.
I owe you, but I've already lost over $500 with you.
I wouldn't take a marker from my best friend. I had a best friend.
Now listen, Mr. Jones, be reasonable. You can trust me. I haven't got the 20 on me, but I can get it.
Get it.
But I might not be back in time for the race.
That's your tough luck. No markers.
Hello.
Look, this is my little girl. I'll leave her here while I go for the money.
I ain't taking no dolls for security.
Look, Daddy, he is running away. Is he afraid?
Take her down off of there.
Now listen, Mr. Jones, if you look...
You get down off of there.
You're afraid of my daddy. Or you're afraid of me. You're afraid of something.
Take his marker.
Marker?
Yeah. Little doll like that's worth $20. Any way you look at it.
Yeah, she ought to melt down for that one.
So what has happened there, not to make this film, you know, a French auteur masterpiece, what has happened here is she identifies fear as Sorrowful Jones' problem, just as Roosevelt did for the nation. You're afraid of Daddy, you're afraid of me, you're afraid of something. In fact, he's emotionally afraid. And she gets his emotional heart melting gradually, changes him emotionally, restores, we might say, the sentimental economy, and then he starts spending again. He pays for clothes for her, he buys a new suit for himself, he gets a new apartment, moving out of his flea bag of an apartment, and gradually Shirley's character restores him and other characters in it from heels to heroes by the end of the movie. And the film was a huge hit, a huge box office success, as well as critical success in 1934. Am I the next slide? Shirley made various other films in the 30s, and by Christmas released Bright Eyes with James Dunn, and it was a huge hit. And here she had a foil, a bratish little girl to play off of, and again she restores a jilted man as Dunn plays Luke Merrick, a jilted spoiled aviator. Her father, she's half orphaned again at the beginning of this film, and then loses her mother as well in this film. And again, as in so many films, finds by the end of the film a new family is reconstituted for her. People come together to provide her the adult protection and love that she needs. And of course, your films, again, we might say in various ways, encourage people in the audience to adopt her too, to make her their sister or brother or daughter or granddaughter, niece, what have you, depending on their age and relationship. And that happens again and again in her films. In 1935, she started making historical dramas on a grander scale. She was with Lionel Barrymore in The Little Colonel, and also, more importantly, for most people, with Bill Bojangles Robinson in the first of 4 pairings in 1935. In these pictures, Robinson, dancing very much along the color line, plays the role of servants here in a Moonlight Magnolias film. But this is the film in which he does the famous staircase dance and brought his own infectious joy in tandem with Shirley Temple, so they became an irresistible couple. And I want to play you a clip. I can't deny you the staircase dance scene from The Little Colonel. Robinson had done the staircase dance in vaudeville, and he adapted it here to film.
And I couldn't get it done. I paid $5 for a great big hog, and the hog so fat, and I couldn't get it back.
He hums various minstrel tunes.
going on around here?
His object in the beginning of it was to get her upstairs to go to bed, so it works. And she went on to make The Little Rebel with Bill Bojangles Robinson as well. And in there she not only as she licks the Depression and stand up and cheer, she heals the Civil War in The Littlest Rebel, getting a pardon for a Union officer as well as her Confederate father at the same time on the arms of President Lincoln. In the initial screenplay, they had the idea that Lincoln on her spell would then write the Gettysburg Address. I'm not making this up. But they decided, a script doctor said they'll throw rocks at us. Well, next slide. So that Shirley became a huge star in the 1930s, and not only a star in movies, but a tremendous commercial economic engine in her own right. Again, the emotional economy and the economic economy turned together, especially with a little girl. There were all kinds of Shirley Temple dolls and outfits that were popular in the 1930s. That counted for a third of all doll sales in the country, as well as toddler outfits. Her name became the second most popular girl's name in the country. It had been 10th when she was born, and it remained in the top 5 through the rest of the 1930s. So that literally, mothers and fathers are imagining that she would be their ideal little girl in extraordinary numbers. That didn't happen with Clark Gable in the 1930s, or with Spencer Tracy, or any of a number of other figures, worthy as they might be. She got fan mail, 4,000 letters a week, not only from children and from mothers, but also from men, such as this one from a self-described two-time loser just out of the penitentiary, where he'd seen her film Baby Take a Bow, where she plays the daughter of an ex-convict. And he writes, he says, "Kid, you know, as all the time I saw the film, I knew it was a bunk, but kid, you got to me." And she becomes his lodestar, his kind of emotional center, the center of purity and honesty and innocence that's going to keep him straight. So she affects all kinds of people in ways I didn't predict and was astounded by. The next slide. And she also, the question is about her, whether this is work or play.
No, this is about the products.
Or I can't see this with the light here. The products are Shirley Temple dolls, Shirley Temple outfits. They're huge. She creates a new toddler look and extends it up to age to adolescence. The next slide. She herself, of course, endorses these dolls, and she becomes a model for how children should play with their dolls. There are all kinds of oral histories of women playing with their dolls and talking about they would comb their dolls till the hair fell out, and so on, and then do it again. The next slide. And here she is endorsing her own product. Next slide. She also becomes the model child consumer, the child consumer who's assertive in the 1930s, who will not only mobilize adults to buy things to please the children, but to please the whole family. "This is my cereal," she says, and that autonomous, straightforward child, the same child that looks into the eyes of the adult men, looks into the eyes of mom and pop and says, "Get me such and such," and they do. Next slide. And Shirley Temple Lookalike Contests are held not only in the United States, but around the world. In Sydney, Australia, in Bombay, India, in Japan, in Cuba, in Latin America, in Europe. And then we might say, in a larger sense, Shirley Temple Lookalike Contests take place in people's lives, girls' lives around the world. Next slide. All kinds of people are affected by her, not in the United States, but throughout the world. Even Anne Frank, when she, in the 1940s, when she retreats to the attic hideaway to escape from the Nazis, takes her pictures from movie fan mails and magazines and puts them up with a paste pot to make her glad in her apartment. And conspicuous among those are images of the smiling Shirley Temple. The whole question is whether this was work or play, the emotional effects on Shirley Temple. By the next slide. And Shirley Temple's mother and others just insisted, as in that film we saw, that Shirley doesn't really work. Besides, I've got to have her in the act with me. And it was this was just part of her play life. Shirley Temple's own view, later in her autobiography, Child Star, said, I began working at the age of 3 and I worked every day. I thought all children worked because I was born into it. She didn't feel she was a depressed child laborer, but she felt she was a professional from the age of 3. She also had, in addition to an economic importance increasing to her family, she became the family business, an emotional importance as well. The next slide. I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty seeing these.
That's where she worked because
yeah.
I thought every child would.
Yeah, and I got ahead of myself here. And the next slide. Here she is in a publicity photograph, taking her first paycheck, one of her paychecks, and depositing at her father's bank to accounts. And this sort of was the model relationship, that she was a worker but also a saver, that in fact her earnings didn't disrupt the family economy. And the story was that throughout her childhood and youth and adolescence was that her father, a banker, put her money in safe conservative investments, and the family wasn't living off her income. On the next slide. The family, in fact, built increasingly an elaborate house to protect her and to protect their privacy, and it became in the Brentwood section of 4-acre house and yard in the Brentwood section of Los Angeles. Her father, who was getting $95 before he quit his job at the bank, said, "How does it feel with your child getting thousands a week?" He said, "Very foolish." He started managing her accounts, by the next slide, and under the notion of the Coogan Act, passed in 1938, where other children, such as Jackie Coogan, had been exploited by their parents or step-parents for their money. The notion was that increasingly the earnings of child actors would be safeguarded. It seemed Shirley Temple's family needed no such protection. The next slide. But when finally she actually looked at her savings, only when she was age 22 in 1950, she discovered that of the million she'd earned, only about $44,000 was left, and the rest had been siphoned off in bad investments, banks, brokerage accounts, and others. Her father couldn't resist the urge to speculate. Her mother liked to not only dress fashionably, but gamble at the racetrack, and for one reason or another, the earnings weren't there. Shirley Temple, of course, went on to have a rich life as an adult, leaving her career as an actress behind her. She made her last film in 1949, and of course she died February 10th of this year. But no one makes headlines in this country and around the world for being former president to Ghana and Czechoslovakia. Why she continues to be such an immediately identifiable and important name in millions is because of her career as a child star in the Great Depression. Thanks.